All right, great. Let's do it live.
The best behavior. We have 45 viewers already.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Great.
Awesome.
All right. I believe we're live. How do we test if we're live?
I'll
Yeah.
go on YouTube. I just changed my network to that one to not fuck up the connection.
No.
And
Let's avoid the F word from now on since we're live.
Right.
Okay, so I'm gonna put this. I'm gonna share this. This is what I'm gonna do.
Change security.
Yeah. All right. So, is it working?
If it's working, I actually like the setup. Now my computer is fast, but as I said, the internet connection is just...
Okay, so full screen, and then I'm gonna put this in. All right. So I'm gonna assume that. Also, Alina left, I believe. As soon as she's back, we're gonna start. So, she's already back. Perfect. All right. So, thank you everybody who joined us today. Apologies if you've been on for a few minutes and, we were looking at buttons randomly. We're trying our best. So it is our first event now as the independent chain security. As you probably know, we were PwC before and we became independent. We spun off from PwC. And so, for those who don't know us, Chain Security, we do smart contract audits, we do audits of new blockchains, and Nico is going to tell you a little bit about that later. But before that, let me tell you about the exciting event we have today. We're going to be talking about DAOs, Decentralized Autonomous Organizations. We're going to be talking about decentralized governance with 3 of the best experts you can find in the field, people who actually work in that and who have actual experience that they're going to share with you today. So our first speaker is going to be Alina Aseeva from Idavoll network. Do I pronounce this right, Alina?
Idavoll network, yeah, more or less. Not French variant, but Scandinavian.
Thank you so much for joining us, Alina. Then after her, we're going to have Samuel Brack from DIA Association or DIA Association. How am I supposed to say it?
DIA.
DIA,
Hi.
all right. Thank you very much for joining, Samuel. So Samuel is going to bring us a very technical perspective as the CTO of DIA Association. And then after that, we're going to have Vlad Zamfir, that you guys, I'm sure, already know, almost blockchain royalty, one would say, longtime researcher at Ethereum Foundation. And one of the quotes we can attribute to Vlad is, "It is hard to imagine anything more dangerous than algorithmic law." So that promises to be an interesting debate. Thank you, Vlad, for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for inviting me. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. All right. So the program of today, what is it going to be? First, we're going to have Alina, who's going to explain a little bit on DAOs, on decentralized governance, then Samuel, then Alina again, Samuel again. We're going to have Vlad, and then after that is going to be the panel, the Q&A, and you guys in the audience are going to have the opportunity to ask your questions. So feel free, hit that YouTube chat, hit our Telegram, no, the YouTube chat. That's all it can be. And then we're gonna be happy to answer your questions in the Q&A later on. So without further ado, I'm gonna first, open up the floor to my colleague Nikos Heffer, who is a blockchain engineer at Chain Security, who's gonna tell you in just a few minutes what we do and who we are.
Oh, just a few minutes. So
just a few minutes.
I tried to be quick. We started as a startup, as a spin-off from ETH Zurich, and started with reviews of Solidity, smart contracts, We were one of the first ones creating a platform to automatically review the smart contracts. We had researchers in multiple fields trying to develop new tools to push security reviews of smart contracts further. You can check out everything we have on our website, www.chainsecurity.com, www. And yeah, so we actually became quite famous at some point, and PwC got aware of us because our reports landed at their law department, and at some point we thought that we can join forces with PwC, try to target the traditional companies and the traditional market. We were with PwC for one amazing year. Unfortunately, there were just issues because the regulated market is, well, not as far as we thought, and we are in a very fast-moving environment. So at that point, we again had to spin off PwC, and now we're independent. And if you want, you can check out our website. If you have any questions, you can contact me or Emily on LinkedIn.
So the website is www.chainsecurity.com,
right? And yeah, I'm happy to help if there are any questions.
Thank you very much, Nico. So that makes it, even more interesting to talk about this decentralized governance and decentralized law. Bless you, Alina. And decentralized law, after seeing that, maybe sometimes there are some issues, when you want to communicate between the legacy world, if I may say, of traditional law, traditional banking, traditional finance, and then the world of new finance that we're operating in right now. All right, so without further ado, our first guest of today is Elita Esseva. Alina, can you maybe share your screen? I believe you have prepared slides for us, right?
Yes, let me share it.
Amazing, thank you so much.
Do you need to give me some rights for that?
Do I need to give you some rights? I believe you shared it right before, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, and now I forgot how to do it.
There's this, on the upper right corner, you have the up arrow, which is right next to the leave button. Try to click that one. Is there an up button right next to your microphone?
Yes.
Yeah, then try that one.
Mm-hmm. It shows like one's up, one down. Mm.
If you press up, there should be the slide up, and then there should be the option to choose your window.
Somehow it doesn't.
Does there anything come up from the bottom?
Just the gray screen appears. I'm on the Microsoft Teams now. Maybe I should just try to go into it in the browser. Oh, I apologize so much for that.
Yeah, it worked before, so let's see if you can manage it.
And then maybe while you're looking for that, would it be interchangeable that Samuel, you would do the presentation first? Is that a possibility for you, or were you planning to build on Alina's presentation?
I can do it first, I think.
Wait, let's see. Alina is joining with another account. That might work.
All right, so
yes.
For the folks who are watching, I apologize. This is, when you're doing live, this is what happens. Sometimes there are some unplanned events. So
do you see my screen now?
I do not.
Wait a second, maybe. Samuel or Vlad, if you see it, just yell out.
Unfortunately, not yet.
No.
One second.
All my apologies to the people who are watching.
It's fine.
How many
I
people
think
do we
it's the
have?
name of an effect, right? When you try to show something to people, then at that time it doesn't work, right?
Let's see if it doesn't work. We can still
Okay.
Samuel first.
Nice.
You see
I
it
see.
now?
Now it happened. Yep, now it works.
Yeah, it
Amazing.
is showing up. Yes!
Awesome.
It worked.
Great.
Great,
Fantastic.
great.
Oh, finally we can get started. I apologize for this delay, but
it
now we're all
happens.
together on that. So let me begin with a short intro for myself and my project. I work for Idavoll network. It is a parachain project on Polkadot, so we are a cross-chain project for building DAOs for every organization. And me, myself, I used to work for McKinsey Zurich as a consultant, and then my journey in Ethereum world began. I worked for Equilibrium, stablecoin. I worked on Aragon Stack. I won the Ethereum Denver hackathon, and Vlad may remember me there, but maybe not. We met actually in Brack afterwards. I hope you do.
Yeah, actually,
Now,
I think so.
I had a pink hair color at that time. So this is all we need to know about DAOs. Let me explain you in a few examples how it might work. The picture speaks for itself. So basically on the left corner, you see the traditional organization with a lot of, on the left side, you see the decentralized organization where every unit talks to whom it wants to. It can be explained as steel organization from the management books. And on the right side, it's a traditional organization with one leader and a lot of subsidiaries. So basically, why the world needs DAOs? It already has DAOs. Even before blockchain, we had them. So imagine you are a village and you want to build a road and plant trees around it. So usually you want to decide which type of trees shall be it, like birch, apple trees, palms, and you assemble a gathering of people living in this village and let them vote. And obviously people who live close to the road, they have more rights on it, right? So they have a better say in what kind of green landscape will appear. So that is actually a traditional voting, and you can structure it as a decentralized organization voting, because it is what it is. In the example in the picture, let's think of a hedge fund. If you're a hedge fund manager and want to allocate 100,000 USDT into Uniswap, you can just press a button and do it, but it's not very DeFi in a way that it's an authoritarian management. So basically, you can allow people to vote on the ground and still press the button, but it's not ideal. So in ideal world, you put organization on Aragon Stack, let the voting happen on-chain, and let the agent, the part of Aragon, execute it on-chain as well. This is two examples, one from real world, another from the world of finances, but both of them explain how DAO works. So it's basically a voting process which comes and assigns different voting rights to the members. That's it. And in the lower part of the picture, you can see now several features of the DAO. Obviously, DAO is on blockchain. It is not dependent on centralized authority, like in the right picture. No, it's wrong. So it's governed by smart contracts, and in a way that the decision is unstoppable. So once the voting passed, nobody and nothing can stay on the way of it being executed. And it is ruled by economical mechanisms solving coordination games. Same thing as corporations and states do for you. So that was enough theory. Let's come into practical examples. These are different reasons why people want to have a DAO. The first one is the most obvious. All the organizations you know on blockchain, MakerDAO, Uniswap, Compound, 1inch, they have their governance model because they are profitable companies and they want to have their decision-making process on-chain. So they usually use their own stack, like Compound Governance Alpha, site solutions, like Snapshot. We will speak about it later, but basically what it is. Snapshot is a signaling mechanism. It is just a voting page taken off-chain, and it allows people to vote, but not to execute on-chain. It is a drawback, of course, but why 1inch and Uniswap use it? Because it's very expensive to take all the voting on-chain. So Aragon has its disadvantages. Now we're coming to the second part, public goods. This means actually that DAOs are not only organizations, they are blockchains themselves. You know that Bitcoin can fork itself if they decide to change the protocol. Actually, in Polkadot, you don't fork. You have nominators and validators voting directly on chain, and the decision being taken in a more smooth way, so to say. So Polkadot can be described as a DAO blockchain. And Web3 Foundation is a union giving away grants for good people, and it's also working as a DAO. Then the third party is a commercial venture capital on chain. It's LAO, Metacartel, and the DAO, which dramatically failed several years ago. I don't know if you call it several, many years ago, and put a dark shadow on everyone. But it used to be a VC before that. Fourth, insurance pools. What it means actually. So Aave has a lot of capital on chain, $2 billion. So they were afraid that somebody will go wrong and the capital will vanish, right? So they put 500 million in a special pool, insurance pool. People who put their capital there, they receive the highest interest rate, but this capital is at risk. So if they have a breach smart contract, then this pool will be used. Basically, this pool is also structured and governed by the DAO of Aave.
Okay.
So DAO protects you from hacks in a way. I don't know the fifth example. Like, in my opinion, it would be nice to have a listing on Binance working as a DAO, right, where the community members decide which coin will be listed, but I don't think it exists yet. So it exists in my head, but it would be nice to have one day listing as a DAO. The sixth is actually Launchpad. So this is something like Kickstarter protocol. DAO Maker, Polka starter, DAO, they allow you to raise a small fundraising campaign. It is similar to listing, but slightly different. And the seventh, it's actually the funniest point. So DAO in a real world have not happened yet. But imagine Facebook gives tokens to all its users and allows you to vote on the decisions taken in Menlo Park, or like your local pizzeria giving you a token to vote which recipe will be used next week. So if one day it happens, I will be quite surprised the world of Airbnb, Uber working on a way the torrent system works now, you know? So this will be quite interesting.
That was stressful.
Now an interesting question. So you have DAO taking decision, but who is responsible if something goes wrong, right? Let's say on this Launchpad, it doesn't give you KYC to the projects. DAO has to oversee. If there is an American citizen coming and wanting to buy a token of your project, this can result in bad things happening, right, from regulatory side. So basically, whom can we blame in the DAO? One single person, everyone, all the developers who did it? Yeah, this is a question which is unclear now, and that's why DAOs are a gray zone for regulations. So recent legislation in Wyoming allowed DAO to become structured as LLC. And it is interesting how the landscape will change. For the moment, this question is not answered. If something goes wrong, whom shall we punish in DAO? Everyone or like someone particular? So I leave it to your imagination for now. And now the last part of the first part of our call. This is a table comparing multi-signature wallet versus DAO. Why do you think it's connected at all? Actually, you can take the governance decisions both with Gnosis Safe Wallet and Aragon Compound Governance Alpha, which are DAOs or multi-sig wallets. Basically, majority of your decisions are financial ones. So not like let's repaint the blue carpet into green, but let's assign the tokens into some protocol. So this function is perfectly suitable for both multi-sig wallet and DAO. And actually many protocols, they start working as a multi-sig wallet first with a team of founders and then transferring themselves into DAO. So these are similarities, but there are also differences between them. Amount of votes. So in a multi-sig wallet, the more signatures you have, the more votes you receive. In a DAO, it's not always like that. Sometimes one wallet counts for one vote. Sometimes the more governance tokens you have, the more votes you receive. But why I point in red compound here, you can go to some protocol and lend your token to someone. This random person will borrow this governance token and vote instead of you, which is a little bit of a sad thing for the protocol, because then the token changed its hands. Why we can solve it? Curve, for example, invented the following thing. You need to lock your token for some time before you vote. For 1 week, minimum for 4 years maximum. And this allows you to prevent the flash loan borrowing scheme with votes. Also here you have some models like quadratic voting, and I don't know how you call it, parabolic voting, I think. So basically this allows you to create more unity, like count the votes of the people with less tokens in quadratic voting, or to multiply the votes of the rich guys in parabolic voting. Both methods are used sometimes, and you can either twist it with your wallets being merged or with your wallets being split. So there is always one way to hack on the voting mechanism, but no governance is prone to any kind of attack. And then the last part, multisig is different from a DAO in a way that nobody can join multisig, right? It's built in a way, for example, 2 signatures out of 3, 7 out of 10, and no fresh signature will appear out of nowhere. Usually DAO is something that you can join either by buying a governance token, by being nominated, or just by buying MKR on exchange. That is it from my side, and I slowly go out not to break my wonderful screen sharing. Samuel, are you ready?
Yes, I can also. I'm not sure if I can share the screen above you. Okay. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah. I'm gonna go a bit on the practical side, what we experience with DAOs and what our learnings are from actually having a running DAO for the last few months. Maybe just a short overview of what we are. So we are a financial data provider. We are collecting data both on and off-chain, both from on and off-chain sources, and getting them back into on-chain oracles and off-chain APIs. So the general idea is that it's a community-driven project where we also leverage tools like Gitcoin to get the community back in, and also have the DAO for basically voting on 2 different layers. So first of all, we want to have DAO decisions on strategic decisions. So that's, as Alina already mentioned, is mostly about money. So it's about budget allocations, but also about what products are we going to do? What integrations are we going to target for the next few months? Are we having a look at a new ecosystem, stuff like that? This is not only votes, because votings are always like this hard yes or no, and you can't really have a discussion. But there's also discussion channels. We're thinking about forums, stuff like that. So traditional community management. And the second thing we are also exploring at the moment, so this isn't fully implemented yet, but definitely on our roadmap, is to say, okay, how can we get the DAO into product implementation? And there we're also thinking about a very concrete layer of these implementation decisions. So this could be that you have to sign off commits by the DAO, so that, for a new feature, you want to have the DAO check it, and maybe also have the DAO decide, do we need an audit? Do we just get it into the project as is? I mean, this only works for open source projects, but I think a lot of these projects in this area are open source and could benefit from that, because the communities are very tech oriented. And there's probably a lot of people who can provide an insight and provide significant knowledge there. Also, different feature implementations could be voted against each other. So should we do it this way or that way? Maybe do we need this feature at all? And in our case, also one thing we're developing is so-called data disputes. Because our system is open source and we're collecting financial data, one of the checks and balances we built in is the so-called data dispute system, where people can then say, okay, I don't believe that the scraper for this particular decentralized exchange is working correctly. I'm going to dispute it, and then a vote can happen. And then, in the next step, we plan to build a system where even the exclusion of code can be run pretty much automatically. Also, one thing Alina already mentioned a bit is how do you allocate votes? So the first idea we had was, okay, we want to have kind of one person, one vote. I mean, obviously there's Sybil attacks, but let's try. So we decided to give each wallet one vote and have a minimum holding requirement of, for example, 10 tokens. By that, we want to implement, incentivize the small token holders, and the cost, can run high if you want to have multiple wallets. For example, let's say you buy 1,000 tokens. To split it up into 100 wallets is 100 transfers, and that can be that doesn't scale too well in terms of transaction costs. The downside is obviously you can circumvent it. You only make it more expensive, but you have a quantifiable amount. So you could theoretically make an economic attacker model and say, okay, the gain an attacker can get is only at a certain point or a certain level. So by defining that price, you might even have a tuning parameter to get the minimum holding requirement. In the end, we also had a look at why is on-chain voting or off-chain voting at an advantage or disadvantage. So first of all, on-chain voting sounds like the natural choice. I mean, we're in the decentralized ecosystem. Our entire, the entire system literally runs on a decentralized distributed machine. But the problem with on-chain voting is that if you do votes often and quickly, transaction costs become very high. So let's imagine you have a vote every week, and the vote can cost something between $10 and $50 in transaction costs. The average user will probably think a lot of times it's not worth it to participate, because they don't have an immediate gain just by keeping the project running. So it's kind of a bit of a dilemma there. Second thing, but I think this is not as important anymore, is usability. So especially in the beginning, it was pretty important to educate users about on-chain interactions. But now with the great tool support from the wallets are getting better and better, and the integrations are getting easier. Also with stuff like Wallet Connect, it becomes easier to do on-chain voting. But as I said, we were not looking also at our project in a limited space, but we were also having a look at other projects that we were also kind of involved in. We saw that even in case of an annual general meeting of a real company, which was having tokenized shares in Switzerland, basically almost none of the small investors were participating in the voting, partly because of usability and also of transaction costs, because they were having the impression that it was pretty hard for them to have an influence, and for that privilege they need to pay significant amounts of transaction gas. A second thing we saw in discussions with some users is that voter secrecy is important to them during the duration of the vote. I mean, because the voting time needs to be open for some time, and it's off-chain is pretty easy to say, okay, it only becomes apparent what someone voted to the public after the vote is over. If you do it on-chain, you need to implement a commit review scheme or something like that, which might even require a second transaction from everyone, or at least a second transaction from a centralized oracle, which requires even more transaction costs and is also more complex to understand for the average user. On the other hand, obviously, the non-decentralized voting puts the dependency on a centralized tool, centralized website. But at least for the moment, we think it might be worth to look at that if you're doing your own DAO. So that's the first part from our experience. And I would like to give the chance back to Alina to talk about her experiences.
Let me switch it. Do you see my screen now?
Yes.
Fantastic. Oops. Let's not try to do it. I'm afraid I will lose what I have. So basically here we will talk a little bit about Polkadot. You of course know that it had its one paper issued in 2016, It's launched the Genesis block in 2020, and it will launch the mainnet very soon in summer 2021. So it's like the hottest blockchain of this year, and you shall know about it because it's the only thing which connects the blockchains between each other. So it consists of parachains. It's labeled with the number 3 on the shim. Each parachain has its own set of validators and nominators. And Idavoll network, my organization, also works as a parachain. So basically, why it is important? Because, as said before, gas costs are killing every voting on Ethereum. So there are a number of ways to avoid having decisions on chain. So one way to take it out is to bring it to Polkadot. So we're the first protocol allowing you to have the voting on Polkadot and being executed on Ethereum. This is a little bit of innovation. You know, Aragon is going on Matic and XDAI now, but it's something else. So we are like actually having vote in one place and executing it in a different one. This is something I wanted to show about Polka. And this is how you usually create an organization. So with us, it's a typical form, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 clicks, and you have your DAO set up. This is also something we wanted to build maximum user-friendly. For instance, like in Aragon, from whom we learned a ton. So I'm always talking about them because it's #1 player in the industry. Nobody forgets that. So with them, it's not like that straightforward. Here we have 3 palettes: token model, voting model, and finance model. I will show you in a second how it works. So this is the token model. It enables membership and ownership of the organization. So additional issuance and redistribution of token among DAO members. This is what you see in the screen, requesting new token. This is the finance model. So it enables organization to track its assets and transfer it. And this is fine. It's the best and the most important part. It's voting model, where you see different votes coming through. These 3 templates are linked together using a permission structure to form the complete voting process. This is how it works. So user can create a proposal and pledge a certain amount of tokens to it. For instance, 100,000 DAI to withdrawal funds. So if majority of users vote for the proposal and there is no dispute, the proposal will pass and the fund will be withdrawn. If a large number of users believes that proposal violates the terms of the proposal, it will be withdrawn and defeated. And if later somebody thinks that decision was not fair, they can come back to court and make a court pledge about it. That's pretty much everything from my side. Let me go back one step with the first blockchain principle. So we're here to replace trust with crypto. And this is why we're building decentralized organizations, because we want to have solutions with security, decentralization, nice user experience, which can handle all the FI requirements and interactions between actors. So DAOs are the way the organizations will be governed in 10 years from now. You remember hedge funds 10 years ago, they were like a joke, and now they're everywhere. So I believe like every financial protocol on blockchain will definitely be a DAO in some time from now, but let's watch it happening. This is it from my side, and I take back the microphone to Samuel. One sec, this is it.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm also just make a short wrap up of my points. So yeah, one thing I think which is a very interesting thought for the future, and where we're also looking into, like I mentioned in the beginning, is to say, okay, what can we do to keep real-world consequences by DAO decisions, because if you have DAO decisions which are executed on-chain and the voting result, for example, is held in a transaction, in an event, and you can read out the event, that's nice, but in the end you want to do something with it. And if you want to do something with it which is not connected to or not directly executable on-chain, like I want to move 7 tokens from A to B, you need to have some kind of bridge to your system where you execute it. In our example, we are working a lot with source code. So our idea is that we want to have the DAO kind of control parts of our GitHub operations. So we're looking into how can we connect the DAO decisions into actions on GitHub. So there's basically two directions. One is, for example, there's a new pull request coming on GitHub. How do we get a DAO vote started by that new pull request? And the second direction is, okay, there's now a decision. How do we, for example, get the decision that says yes, integrated pull request into GitHub? So yeah, there's not a ready-made tool for that yet, as far as I know, but that's something where we can build software for. A bit on the strategic side, we also see that a DAO can obviously be a bit too fine granular. So if you do votes, it might happen that you say, okay, there's 10 votes a day. No one is interested in that in the community. So when designing a DAO, it should probably be a bit more of a kind of a board of directors that is not doing the daily operations, but that's more in the strategic decision making. But I think it's interesting to have the options. Our learnings from our community, maybe as kind of a short wrap up. The DAO idea is probably still hard to sell to the average user, especially if you're not really clear on which level of engagement you're expecting from them. The process needs to be very simple, otherwise you're gonna have user experience issues and people asking how does it work, even if to you as a developer it's completely clear, just connect MetaMask and work with it. Also, it's interesting to see how can we even integrate people who hold tokens on centralized exchanges. Is that possible to get them also on board without them having to cash them out and then go back in? Gas costs are definitely an issue where we're also looking into seeing what alternatives are there. It's important to have a forum or chat, because otherwise you're not a community, it's only a voting tool and no one will know what that actually means, and no one will be able to discuss with their peers. The DAO is also probably not the tool that can take your management decisions away in a project, but in the end, it's still something the founding team or the current management needs to do and prepare for the DAO, because the DAO is, it's kind of a sign off, but not only, maybe not doing the thing and doing the decisions itself. And the votes can take their time. So if you say, oh, we are under attack, we need to decide in 10 minutes what we're going to do, a DAO is probably not the right tool for that. With that, I would like to thank you all for your attention and give over to Vlad.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate the opportunity and the introduction. So I made a little plan for my talk here while Samuel and Alina's presentations were happening. So let me just go through that, and I'll try to be as quick as possible. So firstly, I don't work right now professionally in the DAO space, so I should just disclaim that I may not be like up to date with all the regular things happening today. But I was one of the curators on the DAO, and so I got to ride like through one of the craziest like experiences actually in like the DAO world, of basically being kind of like closely involved after a certain point of like the thing getting a certain amount of money and then me becoming alarmed about the DAO, which kind of, if folks don't know, was this kind of like original DAO that called itself the DAO and raised like 14% of the ether, and then like had a critical bug in it that like ended up getting exploited, and the money was like draining out. And then eventually we kind of had a hard fork to recover the funds from the DAO. And then on Ethereum Classic, the like white hat hackers went and like fought against the attacker to like recover the funds from the DAO, and like recovered almost all the funds, but not quite all of them. So it was a really interesting saga that played out around the DAO and the DAO hard fork. And I think it really like has a lot of lessons to teach us about DAOs and the nature of DAOs. And, you know, people don't like to talk about it necessarily too much in the DAO space, I guess, because the DAO hard fork is like widely regarded as like a mistake. But like, personally, in my opinion, it was like the best thing that ever happened in Ethereum, and really, really showed, I think, the nature of blockchain tech, I think, much better than like the kind of myths that are commonly propagated around blockchains. So a little bit about me professionally, I guess, like I work in consensus protocols and proof of stake, and I got involved in blockchain governance actually a while ago when I was like attending events and people were like raising interesting questions around like the morality of different blockchain apps. And so I got into blockchain governance, and then I slowly got into blockchain or crypto law, really, which is like kind of related to blockchain governance and more to do with disputes than decision making. So that's kind of my like some relevant background for me around, you know, like my place in the DAO space, which is not too present today because I don't spend too much time there today. But I did back in the day, and I was interested in DAOs. Actually, one of the reasons I got involved in Ethereum in the first place was because of the concept of DAOs. And so, you know, I'm kind of interested in these concepts, and I would love to talk about, you know, just generally high level some of the concepts. Firstly, like what about the nature of like decentralization and autonomy? We heard this notion from Alina that it's about non-hierarchical governance, which I think was great and is definitely very much part of what it's about. Another thing that's kind of about is this difficulty for external actors to interfere with the decisions, which we also heard come up in Alina's talk. And another thing that it's about, I think, is the decentralization of the ownership of the thing. So as opposed to just kind of like the decision making, the actual ownership, like the who is ultimately responsible and who has actual agency in what happens. So, you know, we kind of know from governance research that like actually like the decisions that are made and then the agency, it can end up being quite different things. And so, you know, if you have like a DAO that's like set up by one person to be one particular way, and they had all the agency, and then like afterwards the governance is decentralized, you know, it may not be really that decentralized, because like there are kind of like these deeper governance questions than just management control kind of things. Another thing I wanted to talk about is like just generally the nature of organizations. It's impossible to define and think about organizations dissolved or like divorced from the ecosystem of the various participants of that organization and the ecosystem of that organization. Like organizations don't exist outside of their interactions with the environment, with other people, and with other organizations. And so to understand an organization, you really need to have this kind of a perspective of who's a part of it and what their world is actually. You can't actually just think of them as like kind of being like users of a smart contract, just abstractly. It doesn't really like, it doesn't get at the heart of what is the organization. The organization is actually like the people, like, you know, as, or, you know, organized in this ecosystem, really. And so if you think about like, you know, what of the DAO is on chain? Well, the answer is like very little of the DAO, actually, because like the organization is like happening in real life, I would say, as opposed to in this like digital space. And so then I want to talk just a little bit broadly about this problem that we have in law and governance today of structuralism, where basically what happens is people believe and act like governance and law is like structures or like things or like systems, as if somehow we follow some process or something that is kind of like a program in order to make decisions, in order to have conflict lawfully. But that's not the case. It's just like completely false at a very, very basic level that law and governance are like structures or like systems or like programs. And I think that is something that really, really needs to come home for DAO folks people, because like basically we kind of are trying to imagine decision-making and organization through this structural lens as if the program is the organization somehow, or as if the program is, much more of like the nature of the thing than it is. And even in law, we have this kind of idea that of like the legal system, and like the role of the legal system in law has been completely overblown because of the structuralism, which is like a sign of the times, where basically people like everything has structure. Everyone just imagines that everything is structured, when really like people are not like structures, governance is not like structure, law is not like structure, and you really have to like kind of work hard to break out of this mold of imagining that things are like systems. I have a couple of recommendations. One of them is ecology, and the other is media theory. So I think media theory and ecology can help get out of the structural mode from kind of within it. Because ecology, it's kind of like, you can think of them as ecosystems, but it ends up being much more rich and complicated, and has this incredible epistemological mix of stuff happening in ecology, and you can kind of really branch out from systems thought. And then media theory is great because you can think of the technical mediums, the nature of the thing you're encoding on, but then it starts to become about people's expression and their experience, and you start to and it kind of brings in this really human side to our governance and law conversations, which I think is like sorely needed, especially in the context of autonomous software and algorithmic law, for example. So let me just wrap up with some other loose comments around, and maybe responding to some of the content in the presentations today. I think the utility and the place of voting in DAOs actually was best captured by Samuel, close to the end by with a little bit of a aside, which is that it's like more about the signature. Like voting is actually really much more about the signing authority, about the like formal signature that's like formally represents the fact that this is the decision. Then is it actually like a decision making process. And so I think if you understand voting as like a signature as opposed to like the process of making the decision, it'll help clarify a lot of this conversation, and maybe let us have less emphasis and time spent on the voting system and more time spent on how do we actually make decisions in a way that's like responsible and good. And I think that I think that the voting thing and the post-structuralism thing really comes together also, because if you recognize that we are not like our decisions are not, no matter what organization, is never going to come down to a system, then it'll help you put voting systems in their place and put like real decision making kind of at the fore. So for me, really, DAOs are really about people organizing in this decentralized way along the lines we talked about, but nothing really to do with these systems of code. Those are just kind of something that enable and are useful if we understand their place. But if we let them be the means by which we make decisions, then that's going to be abused, and we're going to get basically unlawful outcomes forced through by voters. And that's like, not going to be okay. And I think the biggest problem with the DAO space actually is this notion of law, this kind of lawlessness that comes through the whole fully autonomous software scene that we're kind of in. That said, one more last kind of closing point, sorry to go long, is, I think that we do already have limited liability with respect to DAOs, even if they're not on chain, even if like there's no regulation that like recognizes that, basically because of the organization and because of the way in which anyone who understands the facts of the situation would rule if it was really decentralized. And so I think it's important to not allow any judge to say that you guys have unlimited severed liability in like a non-criminal case. you know, because like that's not the rule of law, and it's like and there's no way that this could be left to be arbitrary. Like, you know, every judge is subject to the rule of law, and you can't just assume that because there's no regulation that you don't have limited liability. You need to think about it. You need to do some jurisprudence and think, you know, actually about all the possible judgments and, you know, things that could happen. You know, you have to like do this real legal analysis. And so I think I encourage people to do that as opposed to just kind of wait for the regulators, because it's going to be a long way. And so with that, thank you so much. And really appreciate the talks, even though I mostly spend time on criticizing now. I just kind of don't know how much time I have. Thank you. Well, so in blockchain, immutability is kind of an institution that governs the way in which it's like a crypto law institution really that governs the way we have conflict about protocols. It basically says, look, we agree not to change it. Like that's kind of like the rule. It's like as much as possible we agree not to change it. And so it's like this legal norm that has become basically like international law through like this fact that it's associated with the blockchain at such an educational level that like when people learn about the blockchain, they become inculcated in this norm that like we don't change it. Like that's the rules. And so this like crazy law is what immutability is. And I think it's like way out of line and like actually kind of unlawful. And I think that it's only a matter of time for it to like kind of go away or become sidelined or become recognized as disinformation, etc. Now, finality in blockchain has to do with blocks reverting or not in your blockchain client. And actually, like I guess if you have finality and there's a couple of things that could happen that would violate your immutability assumption. One of them is you can have like actually some tamper evidence in the chain. So the chain has been tampered with and you can see that. But it's not reverted, it's just tampered with. And the other thing that can happen is you can have an irregular state transition. So basically like the protocol isn't followed. There's like some weird thing that happens, but it doesn't like revert any unfinalized blocks. And so like all the blocks can still be in the record, not tampered with, but still there's an immutability violation. So that's actually a really good question, and I would say that like for the most part, I like am a big fan of not tampering with the blockchain and with block finality, but I'm like super not a big fan of immutability of the protocol, and in particular in the way that it allows smart contracts to operate without intervention. Well, sorry, I hope you don't mind if I jump in. I'm not sure if that question was for me, actually. Sorry. So I want to let you go first, Samuel. Sorry, I feel bad.
Oh, no worries. Yeah, I think it's an interesting question because, yeah, I think it's, in my opinion, basically, is not sure if it's an utopia or a dystopia, because you're basically making a very technocratic world where you also only have the view narrowed down on what you can actually implement technically, right? So it might happen that the societal contract kind of in the background is broader or more flexible than your DAO. So I think it's a very good point, and why I mentioned maybe kind of the closing remark in my opinion was to say, okay, it doesn't take away your decisions. It also doesn't take away the decision-making process. And I also think that one thing that's in most of the token DAOs out there, that the DAO decision power is kind of dependent on how many tokens you have. I'm not sure if this is basically the best idea ever, because in the end you're also making a very you're building in a mechanism which is self-emphasizing.
Sorry to interrupt you, but that's an excellent point, and actually that's one of the questions that we have there in the audience. They're asking, so we talk a lot about DAOs, but we don't talk enough about plutocracy. Plutocracy being giving the power to the people who have money, and that's exactly what you're talking about. So I just wanted to tell you that this is a question, so feel free to continue on that, easily.
Okay, I also don't want to steal all the time, but maybe just 2 sentences on that. Yeah, as I said, we try to get to some level of fairness with this 10 tokens equals 1 wallet equals 1 vote. But obviously, you can't control that in the system, and I mean that's also inherent to the blockchain, that everyone can participate anonymously, which I also think is important. So there's kind of a conflict of interest. Also, if you have discussions off-chain in, for example, a forum, you have people with each has one account because they just speak for themselves, but you don't know immediately if this person has a voting power of 1 or of 1 million. So I think that's also something which differs a bit from our usual democratic process, where we might need some different perspectives, some different tools. Yeah, just open questions from my side there.
Yeah, and if I may add, you also never know, maybe there's going to be one wallet that has a bunch of tokens and it's actually a pool of people who got together, and maybe it's a pension fund and it's 100,000 people who have all their small economies, and then it becomes this big actor, but it's only one wallet. So it's kind of difficult to discuss. And if I can ask a bit of a provocative question, I mean, is a plutocracy really a bad thing when you talk about governing protocols? Because the person who has the most token has the biggest incentive to take the right decision, so that the protocol is going to keep increasing in value. So is it maybe a good thing that these people have decision power? Oof! Oh, Vlad is triggered. I love it.
Yeah. No, how did Vitalik dump all his Shiba coins or whatever it was?
No, first of all, let me tell you that it's not that uncommon. So I know protocols who cap the participation in voting at 1% of token ownership, which is quite high, right? So it is at least being used, if not being discussed. I would say that the only way it can be false is that if people buy lots of tokens for speculating the price, right? And then suddenly they become participants in consensus. This is, of course, what can happen. Normally, the more tokens you have, the more motivated you are. But we're in a trading market. So as soon as you go to exchange, or as soon as you go to compound, you can get very rich soon.
Thank you. Yeah, it's true that indeed it's kind of assuming that the people who hold the tokens hold them long term, which is not the case, right? You just have to be in there for a minute, make a bit of a buzz, and then sell again at a profit. That's true that you don't. Yeah.
Or just hack it. Yeah.
All right. Well.
And also, I think the complete anonymity is also wrapping over some of our ideas of democracy, because in a traditional voting where you vote about, I don't know, the new road through your town, you are not anonymous. So you are accountable in the future. If you do something stupid, people will remember, and they will basically, even they might be very conscious about what you did in the past. This is not necessarily any more the case in these DAOs. So you basically have a clean sheet every time. So I think that's also a factor in making it harder, but also maybe in some cases making it easier for people who are marginalized to participate. So I think it's not necessarily something bad to have a plutocracy, but you have to decide it's different.
I just want to say compulsively that it's also very much not private, like very much not anonymous. Like if you if you have like the right tools, like you can. It's like people shouldn't assume that they're anonymous. Even though obviously you might not be first. Yeah, of course, they're pseudonymous, and there's just so much data. It can be hard to stay anonymous. But I want to go back to this like code is law thing for a second, if you guys don't mind.
Yeah, for sure. That's the theme, right? Go for it, please.
Yeah, I just want to say that there are like limits to what we can consent to as a contract, and so like there's limits to contract law, there's limits to private law, there's limits to what you can opt into, and so and the idea that like we can opt into an agreement that says that we'll do whatever this software does, no matter what that software is, and it is kind of, I think, going to turn out to be like not the case, and like contract law and like the law, like the public law in general will think that that's like not actually an appropriate contract, and so actually at least in many cases, and so I think that like that even if we try our hardest to agree, and we like all agree that no matter how much we can't predict, like we're still going to go with the software, like that's still like legally not enough. Like even if we like try to like suspend everything, like from like a legal point of view, like there's like just limits to what you can do in that way. And so like more broadly though, I think that like another kind of important thing is like not only is like code not law, but like law is also not code. And you can never ever try and write a program that is law and that like runs law. Like that will like never work. Like it's just incoherent.
Thank you so much. I think Nico, you're up for the next question.
Yes, actually I wanted to go into the direction what Samuel said before regarding anonymity and all that. And I think like in my opinion, I mean, I'm not super into the DAO ecosystem, but it all boils kind of down to, as long as there is anonymity, we will have trouble to get regulations working, to cover that issues and to get these DAOs working legally, right? Because I cannot see any case where you are basically an entity with anonymous or semi-anonymous or pseudo-anonymous participants, which then will go in the direction who is liable, who actually is this entity. So I think, I don't know if what's the current state there. Where is it going? What are the endeavors to basically get a regulative sound foundation for DAOs?
Good question.
I briefly mentioned that the recent news come from Wyoming, where it became public knowledge that DAOs now are registered as LLC, they receive their bank account and can actually work as a normal company would. But this law shall come into practice only in June and July.
Elena, can I just ask you, can you explain how that works? How do they recognize DAOs? How do they even do that? Can you explain a bit more?
Like, it's only announcement of the law, so it's not in practice yet. It will happen in summer, and then we will see all the troubles they are going through. I mean, I envision it to work like that. You have like the DAO founding members' bank account, right? The same as the board of directors, you have DAO members. But then the question I also posed, like, who would be liable if the DAO, for example, borrows money and never returns back, right? How it will be sued. So that's like the just innovation in this space coming from the United States. I think they will be the first to break their neck, and then we will see what to do.
Okay, then that's interesting. There's actually also going to this direction. So let's say if this all is working and I'm part of a DAO, or this concept basically takes off, then it might be that I'm also part of multiple DAOs and all that. So it kind of, they're basically two things. So first thing, this was the question which was asked in the chat. So how do you deal with the effectiveness of DAOs over time? because the idea of being part of more and more DAOs and basically also will be the less ability to govern effectively in these DAOs, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, of course.
And that would be the first question. Okay, let's go with this first question.
Yeah, if I can just add on the question, it's true that it takes time to participate in the DAO, to understand how it works, to decide how you're gonna vote. And already, if you just look in normal democracies, right? When I say normal, of course, what is normal? But for example, in European democracies, people don't vote that much, right? And we see that in decentralized systems, that it's even worse, the abstentionism, that people don't actually go to vote. And Vitalik Buterin was saying that governance is like a public good, and it's the victim of the tragedy of commons. So that everybody wants it, everybody wants good governance, but then the problem is that who's actually gonna go out and do it? And the more DAOs you are, the less effective you can become at it. So I just wanted to add my first answer to the question before throwing it to you guys. Please go for it.
I mean,
Vlad, go on.
So how do you maintain effectiveness?
I think that's totally right. Although I think it's more general than just voting. I think it's just like if you're part of an organization and you have rights, responsibilities, and obligations, whatever, or have duties in that organization, that's going to take up some time, and there's only so much time that you have. And so if you have any reasonable organization that requires anything really from you, unless you're a passive beneficiary, it's going to be some kind of work. And so of course, the more of them that you are, they're basically going to compete for your attention, and that's good. We want them to compete, right? We don't want to be like stuck in bureaucracy DAO.
What's a bureaucracy DAO?
Just a potential dystopian DAO where it's just operates like a huge bureaucracy, and you can't really talk to a human. You just have to fill out paperwork.
Yeah, so maybe...
Samuel was going to add something.
Okay, Samuel.
Maybe one word to add is delegation. So I think you can have scalable delegation systems. Also, maybe that's something to extend current modern democracies with in some term. That you say, okay, for some topics I want to trust that other wallet. For some topics I want to vote myself. For some DAO I want to vote myself. So I think that's something that can be... that can be managed on that kind of level, so that you say, as you mentioned with the pension fund, some of your DAO votes might be pulled with someone else, and you trust them.
So basically, the second question, the follow-up question there, which I was asking myself in the beginning because I'm not a DAO expert. What I think is. Even though I'm a big fan of democracy, it shows also in Switzerland, basic democracy is slow, right? It's just a slow process. Meaning, so what do you think DAOs can get to decisions faster, or are they less effective because there are more people involved? How do you see that? Because basically, if I'm a fund manager, for example, market's crashing, I can act quickly. Bam, right. So, but you need to give everybody the time to vote on a proposal, which might be already slow.
Yeah, I don't think the voting is a fundamental part of DAOs really at all. And and in terms of the question of how do you give people quick agency and a decision that needs to happen fast, I definitely think voting is not going to be the answer to that. Clearly, right? You basically need to have basically a participation in the mediums where people are having the governance decisions, and then the governance discussions, where people are actually talking about what are we going to do? You need to be part of those channels if you want to have that agency on a fast time, because basically you have to influence that decision before it comes out, and there's a place where that decision is being made, and you should be there. There's no other real way, and voting is structuralism and that, which we just kind of forget about for the most part in the context of organization, because it's not really that core to the way the decisions are made.
Isn't it then counseling? Isn't it being the trusted advisor of the emperor then?
Well, I mean, yeah, but there's rule of law even in an exceptional circumstances where you have to operate with limited supervision. I mean, it's not like it suddenly becomes like, not itself. Like I would say like this, like the decentralized and the autonomous part, I think has more to do with the agency than the day-to-day management. So like, if you have someone who like, is making decisions day to day and is like, or maybe even like intervening in an emergency, as long as they are not like literally like ultimately responsible, as long as they are not the owners, as long as they are subject to this rule of law where like, they don't get to be the dictator, but like there's actually like a legal process for not just allowing them to act exceptionally, but also for holding them to account afterwards.
Yeah. Samuel, I think you wanted to add something. It seemed, or Alina, no, it seemed like you want to add something. Because I was going to add something, so I want to first give you you're muted, Alina, for me. Still muted.
Made such a speech.
Now I hear you.
I was just apologizing for me departing a little bit earlier than the end of our discussion. I have to run on another call. But thank you so much for having me. It was a great pleasure to be on this panel.
Thanks, Lena.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alina.
Thank you.
Have a great
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Yeah, maybe a comment from my side. I think it's pretty much what Vlad said, but it's like a board of directors, right? If the fund goes south or the market goes south, the fund manager also wouldn't ask the board of directors about their vote, but they have a strategy in place where they say, okay, if that happens, you are allowed to do this and that. And I think the DAO is kind of on the voting level at least should be like that, and that you have executives that are working for the DAO.
Okay, yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. If I can just add a small thing on that topic. So, the dictatorship. What's a dictatorship initially? Dictatorship is in Roman times, in ancient Rome, when there was a need to take a very, very quick decision, we would elect a dictator that had for a very limited amount of time, they could take all the decisions on their own so that it would be as fast as possible and you wouldn't have this whole Senate and whatnot there to vote. So I think that's kind of interesting to remember that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I think today dictator has this kind of anti-democratic undertone that it didn't really there, or maybe it did then too. But like I think basically what was it, Marcus Aurelius became like permanent dictator. He said like, oh, this is a never-ending state of emergency, and then it kind of like became, but for me I think like there is plenty of room in the rule of law for people to act and take a lot of leadership in this kind of way, while still being constantly kept in check by other people who like recognize that this is an exceptional state and that this isn't like normal state of affairs.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, this topic inspires me. I wanna bring. So Nouriel Roubini, this economist, from the US, who was very much anti-crypto at the time, and he was saying, Vitalik Buterin is a benevolent dictator for life. Do you guys agree with that, or is that ridiculous, or what do you think?
So benevolent dictator for life has a different meaning in software than it does than you would think in English or whatever.
Uh-huh.
Like it has a particular meaning in software, and to be honest, yet to be seen. Like in Ethereum, there's different projects. Like he's benevolent dictator for life for like each two, and like assuming that that's successful and taking over each one, then maybe he'll be like benevolent dictator for life for each one also. But like for now, every different project has their own BFD. BDFL. Sorry. I'm not a spelling visual. I don't know. I'm not good at switching for some reason.
Yeah, I think a better example for the benevolent dictator is Linus Torvalds of the Linux project, because that's since 30 years or something already. And there you can also see how this works, that there's still input of the community if this is managed correctly. But I also think with crypto, it's one of these design features that's easy to fork. I mean, we've seen with the previously mentioned Ethereum Classic that this can happen. And I think then if the community decides whoever the community might be, the miners or the users. That's not the way we want to go. The benevolent dictatorship is also worthless at some time because the project isn't relevant anymore.
Yeah. Although I don't know if there's ever been like a super successful majority takeover or a majority one. Like, there's always like a minority.
Yeah.
It would be exciting to see like a majority of people, fork one of these big projects. It'd be great.
Yeah, I think Bitcoin might have been a case if they, a few years ago when they were deciding of the block size, if they changed it or not. I think it was short before ancient times.
It always seemed to me like the big blockers were in the minority, but I guess I was like, it wasn't ever clear to me.
All right, so I'm sorry that I asked so many questions, but I think just this topic is so interesting, so I had to, right? Okay, Nico, you had some questions.
Yeah, let's move on to the almighty question, which is always asked, which was asked in the chat. Layer 2 solutions, other solutions to like rollups or whatever. Do you think? What's your opinion? Do you think they will improve stuff? I just open up the field there.
Well, I'm a sharding maximalist. I'm a well-known long-term sharding maximalist. I've been telling people that like there's limits to L2 stuff, or like it's not going to work in various different flavors for a long time, and they've made it a lot further than I ever would have thought. But I still think it's going to be a while before, like, especially for these kind of more interesting recoveries from a Byzantine roll-up producer. So like if imagine you have a multi-user dApp and then the person who's producing the proofs is Byzantine, and then you want to recover from like the evidence that's produced after, like that's actually a really tremendously difficult problem, and I don't really believe that anyone's going to solve it for a non-trivial application. Now, for a trivial application where there's like really nice data structures, like maybe everything's linear or something, like there's like something nice mathematically, like maybe, but like in general, the recovery from a Byzantine operator when there's like multi-users on a non-trivial app is I think going to amount to consensus protocol, and therefore basically be more like where actually I think all this tech is really more useful, which is like for validating consensus protocols and validating consensus protocol output.
Yeah, Samuel, you're nodding. You're 2 cents on that.
I can't really add anything to that, I guess, because I mean, sure, you can squeeze out a few ounces of efficiency in the best case, and it might work for some time. But in the end, I think if you look at it with the systemic goggles, it doesn't change anything. It's at that layer.
So another question, which is maybe a little spontaneous and interactive, because I was just wondering, we have a lot of people from all over the world, especially Asia here. So do you think like DAOs are, I don't know if they are just speculators or really interested in building up DAOs and participating? So do you think there might be regions, or let's say countries, which are more likely, for whatever reason, their political structure, to move to structures like DAOs, or is it more famous or more popular in some countries or regions? I don't know. Maybe or maybe someone in the chat can tell me what drives them. Except for price speculation, please. We are trying to keep this technical in this case. So I don't know. Any opinion there or any idea?
Yeah. Kind of. I mean, it's just like a legal ecosystem thing, basically, where, like, I mean, at least assuming you're talking about, like, where will people set up, like, national law that helps people deal with this, as opposed to, like, where will people actually be when they're part of DAOs.
Yeah.
But basically, there's, like, this whole, like, every country has, like, a legal ecosystem, and there's going to be, like, eventually probably, like, someone there who's like, oh, we should also have a DAO law, like, eventually. And it's the question, like, who, when, what time, basically, because people have to basically try to figure it out and then legislate, and there's like the whole like legal thing that you can kind of expect to happen in like the normal way for the national kind of thing. But if you think about globally where crypto is, like that's pretty much where DAO people are also, because like pretty much very correlated. Like I don't think there's like, you know, like if a country's particularly into crypto, like I think they're particularly into DAOs. Like I don't think it's like much more wrong getting that. But I don't know.
I think so. I don't have any evidence for anything I'm saying, but I think it might be that it's important which language you have, for example, in your structures where you manage the DAO. So, for example, a forum, if it's only in English, it might favor Americans, Europeans a bit more, who usually have English in the school or as a mother tongue, compared to if you have people speaking Mandarin or Japanese or whatever. That might turn them off a bit from the DAO, because they say, okay, I can't really participate in the DAO, even though they might hold the governance tokens, sometimes for speculative reasons, but they're not as active as if they were as proficient in English. So maybe that's a thing where you need to think about multi-language support.
So you basically want to lower the language barrier for all people to join there, because right now I think there's language barrier between us and most people in the chat, which is kind of unfortunately. We would love to talk with all of you. We just don't speak the language. So I don't know if there are like anything you guys want to.
I do have one more question
yes,
that I got
go for it.
that I got over Telegram. Regarding DAOs, so zero knowledge proof and optimistic rollups, what effect might those technologies have on the DAOs? ZKPs and optimistic rollups. So we're talking about the anonymity of voting. ZKPs can help with that, right?
Maybe. I mean, it's hard on Ethereum because you have to pay gas. And it depends on, and so yeah, I mean, like if you go with the ZKP in a roll up, and then no one behaves badly in terms of like your like roll or upper, I don't know what they're called actually.
I'm sorry. I think maybe it would be interesting to start with the beginning. What are ZKPs and optimistic roll ups for the people who don't know in just a few seconds? Like what is the functionality of it?
Samuel, go. Shot not.
Oh yeah, so ZKP, zero knowledge proof, basically you know a secret and you can tell, or you can prove to someone else that you have the secret without telling the secret. I think that's
so basically it would mean that you can vote. I know, Vlad, you don't like that I talk about voting all the time, but I'm obsessed with it. I can't help it, okay? So you would be able to say, okay, I voted, without saying to whom you voted for or for whom you voted. That's the best. Is that a ZKP?
Yeah, that would be one, I think. And I mean, there's ways to kind of have zero knowledge voting with commit reveal, so that you basically say you have two phases. First, you cast your vote with a proof that you voted, but without revealing. And then when everyone has voted, you can reveal your vote. But then still you have to question what happens when someone doesn't reveal, blah, blah, blah. So it's not trivial. And it's also, involves more transactions than if you just do it in this one step. So.
All right, thank you, Samuel, the teacher here. On the fly explaining ZKPs. That's really cool. And optimistic rollups.
That's for you, I guess.
Okay. Well, so optimistic rollups are a way to like try to use ZKPs in order to post on chain the result of some off-chain computation that may be like the result of many interactions. And in a way where like if everything goes through, it's kind of fine, but it can also be challenged with like proofs that maybe like the service or like kind of forged the or like like made two versions of the history. So it's a way to do off-chain to summarize the result of off-chain computation and post it on-chain in order to kind of like save and move a bunch of transactions off-chain using zero proofs.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that was, I think that was really important to explain those two, because maybe not many people know that. Okay, so what effect might these two technologies have on DAOs? It can allow more scalability, and it can allow to protect anonymity.
It goes into the direction which we talked about, I think, when you were gone. But yeah.
Sorry about that.
You can still.
I mean, look. I mean, in my opinion, at the end of the day, DAOs are still like kind of poorly conceptualized, and like the relevance of the smart contract component and the actual voting on chain or is like not actually that big. And so from my perspective, like it's not a huge impact, like even if but the privacy thing actually might be a bigger impact than the whole scalability aspect. But to do zero knowledge proofs, like usually aren't like when you're using zero knowledge proofs, yeah, it's about privacy, but it's not as much about privacy as it could be. Like if you really wanted a really anonymous kind of DAO, you would have people like basically like plausibly deniable everything. Like I would never prove to you anything. I would never let you have anything that I couldn't deny later. I wouldn't like use I would engage in like much. Usually ZKPs are like, I mean, yes, they're for privacy, obviously, but it's not like there's like encryption, which is like a much bigger deal for privacy, actually.
Yeah, I think maybe it has an impact if people come up with other components other than votes that could be put on chain. Maybe there's something, but I'm not. But I can't think of anything right now off the top of my head where I say, this component of the DAO needs to be put on chain, and the zero knowledge proof would help with that.
Yeah, so in making things practical, I think it like might help, but like in terms of conceptually, I don't think there's like a big add. Even if you're going in the privacy route. Although maybe, I don't want to say like definitely not. But like, my DAO research hasn't been, hasn't really been like focused on that kind of thing. It's much more like basic organizational, basic philosophical kind of stuff.
So we have only 3 minutes left, and I'd like to ask one final question, unless we have something from the audience.
I think there's nothing from the audience, so if you want to ask someone a question now, then post it in English, please. Else we go with your question, and then let's...
Yeah. And just so you know, after my question, I'm going to ask for a small closing statement, so, if you want to already start thinking about it. Okay, so... not too long ago, there was, the election, the US election, right? And Donald Trump, who won, and this and that. And there was this prediction market, and it was kind of hard to determine the result of the US election. And then it was this whole thing with like this arbitration and this court on blockchain and whatnot. Can you explain kind of this whole scenario and how that links to DAOs and governance on chain?
I think it shows that governance, even if you have a very simple vote, which is between two options, can be very hard. And I mean, you can have a lot of. It's not between only two options because every state has their own laws, I think. And I'm not an expert on that, but from what I saw from the media, it's. You have this process which looks very simple from the outside, but in its details it has a lot of complexity, and I think that's also something to, as Vlad also mentioned earlier, pretty much in the beginning, to say, okay, there are cases where the DAO doesn't, where the scope of the DAO, the scope of the voting, doesn't really cover the full reality, so you need some kind of control mechanism. So that might be a takeaway from that.
Yeah, I'm not too familiar with like the particular circumstances, but if I remember, there was like the election was supposed to be resolved by some date, and then the count was taking longer, and there was like this big kind of like, and there was like all this controversy about like whether or not like it would be court, right? And then there was this trial, right? And then the court dates, I think, pushed beyond the later. People wanted to throw out the case because being like, look, the election hasn't been decided, they're going to court, or like the votes haven't been counted, and then they have to switch to they're going to court. This kind of case that basically like it's not resolved yet, in which case they like argued like it should be thrown out. And so I guess it was like an interesting kind of like technicality around the way in which we consider the result of the election to be like a time at which you kind of officially consider it to be decided.
Yeah, so again, it's this, eternal problem. How do you translate real world data that is complex, that is nuanced, into something that has to be yes or no, right?
But the law, like real world law, is like not in data really. Like like thinking about like the courts and like the evidence that they might have found or might not have found. I mean, it's not like in data. It's like actually like I would say like not structural at all. It's kind of like this like deeply impossible to reduce and like put into like function law.
Yeah, very true, very true. Okay, guys, thank you so much. So now, closing statements. Who wants to go first? All right, Samuel, I assign you.
Yeah, thank you again for the invitation. My closing statement. I'm really excited to see these DAOs grow, and I think it's despite all of the problems we're talking about, what's the scope of a DAO. I think it's very interesting for the community to have more control over what they are doing, what the projects are doing, in what they invest, and also on a long-term perspective, I think it can enable people to have more control over at least the token economy, maybe also over the grander economy in the grander scheme. So I'm very excited. I think it's a good tool of governance that has its flaws, but it can also be very useful.
Thank you so much, Samuel. All right, Vlad, the floor is yours.
I think he had just connection issues. Yes, I think Vlad right now. Also, his sound was a little.
Maybe he doesn't want to make a closing statement. Maybe he doesn't like
just.
And ecology and media theory. Basically, like look like Google them and like bear with all the weirdos who talk about them and like try to like figure out what they're talking about because it's like super deeply relevant. Because basically, post-structuralism will kind of show you why and how these systems that we talk about aren't as central in like our life or like the life of a DAO than like people like commonly assume in this day and age. Ecology is like a really good way to go from like structuralism to like a much more broad understanding of epistemology, to go from like a place where you're thinking like everything is like a STEM object to a place where you can kind of branch out. Like ecology is like a really multi-epistemological place. And so it's really like a good place to branch out from systems thinking. And then media theory is great because I think it's like really, really important for understanding agency and expression and decisions and things that are really important for DAOs. Actually, like how do people actually express their opinion? What medium? Like on Twitter? Are they on GitHub? Are they on like this other website? What is that medium like, and how does that impact their expression? Is like a really, really deep and important thing in DAO land. And it's also something that is like a non-structural thing. Like you try thinking about it in terms of like structure of the paper, like it just won't work. And so these three things together, I think, can like really like move people's consciousness to a place where like they can be a little bit more useful in DAO land because they can understand the DAO and its ecology and the place in and then to like understand also that like DAOs are a medium some deep way.
Okay, so post-structuralism, to understand that we can live after the structure, so basically that the world we live in now is not something that was designed by God initially. And then ecology, so to kind of see ourselves in our environments, and then media theory to see how do people express themselves and how does that work, to carry your voice in the public space. And that is how people can learn more about the DAOs and maybe build our future, the future of governance. Thank you so much, Vlad. So I think we have some connection issues, but it was really amazing to have you. It was so great. I learned so much, and I hope that our viewers also enjoyed it. So this video is gonna stay on YouTube, so feel free to share it. I hope we still have many viewers. And thank you so much again.
Thank you, Samuel. And thank you, Alina. you maybe watch it afterwards. That was amazing. So I don't know. Have a great evening. Depending on where you're located, it's occasion day. So
yeah, evening, night, morning.